Good morning, everybody. Corey Hughes, Bloody History. So before we get started, I'm the worst marketing guy in the fucking world. Really, I am. But I have something to market today, so I'm going to let you in on it. Right now, and the link will be in the show notes, I've released my 433-page collection of documents, photographs, and notes on the unbelievable story of Harvey Lee Oswald, which will be the title of my upcoming book. So, you can go to Buy Me a Coffee right now. It's $20 for the PDF by itself, or for $50, you can get the PDF of A Warning from History, which is over 600 pages, the new PDF, which is 433 pages, and it comes with a copy of my book, A Warning from History, which is another almost 400 pages. So you get about 1,400 pages from me for $50. So there you go. I don't do sponsors on this show, although it's probably a waste of my fucking time. And I'm not even good at pushing my own shit on here, right? So it'd be greatly appreciated if you guys would go and check that out. And also, it is the new PDF is meant to accompany an upcoming presentation I'll be doing. It's probably going to be around 6 hours, and I'm shooting for February the 22nd on the AM Wake Up Slow News Day channel. So, a big thanks to Steve for allowing me to do that. I need to get a confirmation on that date, but I'm fairly sure that will work. If not, I'll let you guys know, and it'll be linked here. I'll send it out as I go live. So, but yeah, I've been busy. I got a lot on the horizon, and this year is going to kill me. This year is going to kill me. So, that being said, let's hop back into Lillian Murret, a key player in this Oswald deception. She's being interviewed by Mr. Jenner, lawyer for the Warren Commission. Mr. Jenner says, "All right, now let me take you back to the beginning now for a few moments, if you will. We had Lee over at the Bethlehem orphanage after he left the house. Is that right?" "Yes, sir. He was there when he was 5 years old, and he stayed there until she married Mr. Ekdahl. Is that right?" "Well, he was in the home at first a while. I mean, he was at my house, I would say, between 1.5 and 2 years, and then I couldn't keep him anymore. I guess I must have just been in some dissension or something." Actually, that's wrong. It wasn't even a whole year. It was from the end of January, allegedly January 28th, unless she wasn't living at the fucking Pauline Street address. Okay? So, like I said, I'm telling you, I don't believe she lived at the Pauline Street address for that 1 month in January with the roaches, because I believe I'm sticking to this, that she was in New York in 1941 for there to have been a House Un-American Affairs Committee file created on her in the Office of Naval Intelligence. There you go. She had to have been there in 41 at some point. Whether or not she came back to put Lee in the orphanage or whatever, these people get leave. Like Oswald's in the Marines, and he took leave, 4 or 5 times over the years. So I don't see any difference with Marguerite Oswald having done her work in the Navy up in New York and having to come back on leave to do things like Christmas leave, right? I think pretty sure most people get Christmas leave. And so she probably came back on Christmas leave, and the day after Christmas, she put Lee in the orphanage. And then she went back to New York, right? So the Pauline Street address with the roaches, myself and Diana Thomas have done a good job of dissecting every single word that's been written about that place. And it's questionable whether she lived there. And to me, I'm starting to believe that Lillian Murret did do some things for her sister in her sister's name at some point in time. So that's always a possibility as well. So before I get off point, let me get back to the document. He was there when he was 5 years old, and he stayed there until she married Mr. Ekdahl. Is that right? Well, he was in the home at first a while. I mean, he was at my house, I would say, between 1.5 to 2 years, and then I couldn't keep him anymore. I guess there must have been some dissension or something. What kind of dissension? She got angry or something, and I might have told her to take her child, or whatever it was, so she put him in with the other 2 boys in the home. She was then quick-tempered, huh? Well, that's what I mean, yes. She would flare up in a moment, is that right? Yes, you see, she was always right. She couldn't take anything from anybody, in other words, or you might say she was not reasonable, and especially in some things that are right, because you can keep doing and doing and doing, but then you get to the point where the other party never seems to be doing anything. She didn't seem to exhibit a full measure of appreciation that was warranted. Is that what you mean? Well, I didn't keep the child for anything like that. I kept him for myself and for the love of God and for so forth, and we liked the child. But of course, we had our own obligation with our own children, and this was her life. She made her own life. Of course, I do say that maybe she made it and then she didn't make it, because you see, it's just the way things happened. What? Huh? Hang on a second. Let me reread that. Of course, I do say that maybe she made it, and then maybe she didn't make it, because you see, it's just the way things happened. Whatever. Now, whether she was the cause of these things to happen or not, I don't know, but she seemed to be a victim of all these circumstances. But they kept repeating themselves, a number of them, isn't that right? Yes, they kept coming along, that's right. Now, she then married Mr. Ekdahl, is that right? Yes. And you had met him only once, I believe you said. Once, that's right. Were you at the wedding? Oh, no, I didn't go to the wedding. They were married in Texas. Were you advised that she was about to marry him? I don't think I knew she was about to marry him, no, sir. I just received a picture of her and Ekdahl on their wedding trip, and she had written on it, happily married, and she sent a picture of the house that they lived in. It was a very nice place. They seemed to be doing okay, you know. They were married here in New Orleans, or were they married in Texas? I imagine they were married in Texas. Mr. Ekdahl was a divorced man. I guess he was a divorced man. He had to be. I don't know, but I don't think he could get married without being divorced. He had a son. Yes, I know he did, and his people were Boston people, were they not? Yes, I know she met his sister. It was her, his sister, that sort of persuaded her that she ought to go ahead and marry him. She went up to see them, I think. In Boston? Yes. You think your sister influenced her a lot? Yes, I think so. But she was somewhat disappointed in Mr. Ekdahl insofar as his handling of the family funds was concerned. Is that right? Well, I imagine she was. Well, I don't want you to imagine. What impression did you get from what she said to you? Well, she just said that she thought things would be different, that since he was a high-salaried man, she didn't think she would have the kind of life she was living, like pinching pennies and having to ask him for everything that she wanted. I think she was under the impression that he would give her so much, or I don't know anything about the amounts, you know, but that's what I gathered from what she told me. All right. Now, I think you said that he did not assume responsibility for any of the other 3 children. Is that right? Oh, for any of the 3 children, not the other. God, that would have been a 4th. I don't need another children in here. So he didn't assume any responsibility for any of the 3 children. Is that right? That's what she said. And she told you when she placed her 2 boys, John and Robert, in the military school. What was the name of that? Chamberlain Hunt Academy. That's kind of weird that she would know that offhand, isn't it? That she was assuming the responsibility of paying their way. Yes, she did. She always had a lot of character. That I can say about her. You know, for a woman alone, she would have never done anything she was supposed to do, even though she was in dire circumstances and so forth. But one thing would come on like that, and she would just act up very quickly. Like I told you, if she didn't like something happening or something you did or said, something like that. Of course, there are always 2 sides to every story, and I don't know the other side. I only know one side. Would you say that Lee lived with you from about 1939 to 1941? Yes, I guess it was along there. It's hard to remember those exact dates. Okay, let me just pause here because I'm having a meltdown. See, I don't know what the fuck these people's problem is. Is he asking stupid questions because he's stupid, or is he asking stupid questions to see if she's stupid? I have to imagine it's the latter. Okay, what's wrong with this question? Would you say that Lee lived with you from about 1939 to 1941? Yes, I guess it was along in there. Well, that's not possible, because he wasn't even born till October the 18th, 1939. And it wouldn't be till 1941 that he goes to live with Lillian. So I don't know. And he has to know this, right? These people are not retarded. He has enough information to ask very pointed questions, right? But then he doesn't have the information for very common things. No, these are bait and switch questions. It can't be 39 to 41, okay? But see, usually when you have a bait and switch, it's so you can get someone with a gotcha, right? But he's not getting her on a gotcha ever. You can't get her on a gotcha because she's part of the scheme, right? Yes, I guess it was along in there. It's hard to remember those dates exactly. It's been so long. Did he live at any time at 1010 Bartholomew Street in New Orleans? Yes, they did. That's the house I was trying to recollect that she bought, I think, after she left this Alvar Street residence. She bought this house on Bartholomew. It's funny, they were right around the corner, like literally like 5 houses away. Yes, they did. That's the house I was trying to recollect, and I just read that one. So Mr. Jenner says, and she lived there about a year. Is that right? I don't know how long she lived there. Well, I can tell you this. She moved out of there in October of 41. And then we don't have a record of her until allegedly she moves into the Pauline Street address, which I don't think is valid at all. So October 41 it is. And we don't know if she moved out of Bartholomew before October, but it was sold in October of 41. So you see, we have some questions here. Everything about this deception and Marguerite Oswald tells me that there is a dimension to this that we're completely missing. There is a perpendicular dimension to things that would function as a cipher. That if we knew this other dimension of things, it would explain a lot of the stuff that we come across that we don't understand, right? God, it's frustrating. Mr. Jenner says, and she lived there about a year. Is that right? Well, I don't know how long she lived there. Do you recall her living at 2136 Broadway in New Orleans? What street? Broadway. No, I don't. 2136 Broadway. No. That was just a month, about the middle of August. Wait, hold on a second. Oh my God, did he just narrow down the dates for me? Oh my God, Mr. Jenner, I love you. You just narrowed down these fucking dates for me. Like, I gotta screenshot this real quick. Because I didn't really have much of a time frame for it except a set of years. And this is great because it's less than a month, which would it was just a month, about the middle of August to about the 10th of September 1942. How come we don't have any documents that say that? Why don't we have any documents that say that? Because they've been destroyed. That's why. So, all right, let me continue on. I'm getting excited here. So 2136 Broadway. No, that was just a month in the middle of August to about the 10th of September 1942. Oh, that's so good. That's fucking so good. Because that place was a fucking hotel. That place was a hotel. God, that fucking makes me feel so good and confident that she was in New York at that fucking hotel. Oh, God, what was it called? The Belvedere, I think. I'll check. Something like that. I know nothing of that. So while her fucking sister allegedly lived at 2136 Broadway, literally right up the road from her in August of 42, she knows nothing about it. Because she wasn't there because she was in New York. Do you recall her residing at 227 Atlantic Avenue in Algiers? No, I don't. That's possibly where the boys were over in an orphanage or whatever it was. I don't know. No, that definitely is not an orphanage, okay? They did go to an orphanage for a little bit in Algiers, but then they went to the Washington School, and then they ended up at Bethlehem, so that was before, right? So the problem with the Atlantic Avenue address is that's in Staten Island, all right? Anybody who's ever lived in New York, as soon as they hear Broadway and Atlantic Avenue, they know that's local, right? So, God, this testimony makes me feel fantastic. All right, that's not the Bethlehem place, is it? No, I don't know what orphanage that was, but they were over there in Algiers, and then they were transferred from Algiers to Bethlehem down here in New Orleans. Where's Bethlehem located, this Bethlehem institution? It's way down off of Claude Street somewhere, way down on the other end of town. I don't think it's there anymore. Could be. It was a very old place. I've said that she married Mr. Ekdahl in 1948. I'm afraid I was wrong about that. I think it was 1945. Yes, sir, it was April the 11th, 1945, to be specific. And she married him, which squares more with your recollection. Yes, I think so, because that's what I thought. Lee was around 5, and you had him down as 8, and I couldn't recollect having him at 8 years old. You were right in your recollection. See, he's testing her. He's testing her. Now, what about that town in Texas that they moved to? Oh, I think it was Fort Worth. They moved to Fort Worth. Yes, I think so. Was that the Victor Street address? Does that refresh your recollection? No, Victor Street was in Dallas. Well, she lived at a couple places, you know. You mean after she married Mr. Ekdahl and moved to Texas from Texas to Fort Worth? Mr. Jenner, yes. I don't know the address at the time. I just don't recollect that address because she lived in some other places too. I really don't recall. Do you recall whether she ever lived in Dallas? I never knew she lived in Dallas. See, that Victor Street was in Dallas. Is the town of Benbrook, Texas, familiar to you? No, you see, I hadn't heard from her. You see, she went from New York to Texas. That was about 2 years later, I think. I just don't know that. Hang on a second. Did anybody catch the fucking problem here? God, this is some blockbuster testimony. I feel like an idiot for not having really gone through this before. See, they're talking about Benbrook and they're talking about Victor Street. So what era are they talking about? They're talking about 45, 46. Okay? That's the era they're talking about because she marries Ekdahl in April of 1945 and they sell the Victor Street house in June of 45. And from there, they'll move into the Ewing Street address in Fort Worth, right? So she goes from New York down to Dallas and then to Fort Worth. That's the actual confirmed through the documents order of things. And so we're not talking about 1952, okay? We're not talking about 6 years later. So what the fuck did Lillian Murret just say? She just said, stop texting me. She just said that, you see, she went from New York to Texas. That was about 2 years later, I think. I just don't know that. I remember her saying that she bought some property someplace in Texas and she couldn't keep it up. And she probably mortgaged it to this man. Okay? So she just told Mr. Jenner of the Warren Commission that in the years of 1945 to 1946, in that era, sometime earlier than that, she was in New York and went to Texas. Okay? So, God, the idea that she was in New York for those addresses on Broadway and Algiers, the evidence is just piling up. Mrs. Murret, lawyers don't get tired. It would be too bad if you did. We are under the impression that they moved to Dallas, Texas first and lived on Victor Street. See, he just asked her a bunch of shit questions that he knew the answer to already, right? So he's prodding. 4801 Victor Street and 45 up until 46. That's incorrect. You see, here's the deal. They sold that property in June of 45, but they lived there up until September of 45. They didn't own it until 46 because then in September 45, they drive Robert and fucking John Pick up to the Chamberlain Hunt Academy. They go to Boston, right? This is where we have the very first conflict or distinct missing documents from a potential school in Boston, which he would have had to gone to for him to have a perfect record at the Benbrook School in late 45, right? So this is wrong. Mrs. Murret says, oh, and then he says, I'm not attempting to give you information now. I'm just asking if you recall that or if you ever knew that. Well, that could be, yes, sir, but I thought they'd gone to Fort Worth myself. That's what I thought. You didn't hear much from her during that time, did you? No, during those years, I didn't hear from her much. Maybe she would send a card or a picture or something like that, but we didn't correspond. You say she sent a picture of the house where she was living with Mr. Ekdahl. Yes, and she sent me a picture of herself and the boys around Christmas time, and that's about all. Okay, the picture she's talking about are the picture of her and Mrs. Marguerite Oswald standing with Mr. Ekdahl in front of her 38. Was it a Dodge or a Plymouth or something? The same car that she would later drive to New York many years later, right? Which was an indicator she didn't have a lot of money because she drove the same car for like fucking 10 years or more. Which really contradicts the fact that she had an insurance settlement and owned a bunch of houses, as many as four at one time. So, yes, something's afoot. I have her picture with Mr. Ekdahl when they were married. I wonder if you would give that to your husband and let him bring that in the morning when he comes in. The snapshot, yes. And will you look hard and see? Oh, they really cared about getting that picture, right? Have your husband deliver it. Not let's go send some FBI agents to collect it as evidence. Just have your husband bring it in, right? Yes, and will you look hard and see if you have any other pictures with your children taken when they were small with Lee and that sort of thing? The snapshot of Mr. and Mrs. Ekdahl was produced by Mrs. Murret and was marked and admitted in evidence on her affidavit as Lillian Murret, Exhibit Number 1. Ms. Murret says, no, I didn't have any of my children with Lee when he was living with us. I have Mr. and Mrs. Ekdahl. She sent that picture where she wrote, happily married. Like I say, I can't recollect her living in Dallas in that home in Dallas. I always thought it was in Fort Worth. It appears now that at least during or sometime in 1946, she lived in Covington, Louisiana at 600 West 24th Street and at 311 Vermont Street in Covington. Now, your recollection of that is that this was in the summer of 46. Is that right? Yes, sir. Okay, so this is another one. We have some confirmation of her being there because of the testimony of a Mrs. Benny Comenge. And she referred Mrs. Oswald over to another landlord who was like a friend or a friend of her husband or something like that, right? So these two addresses, 600 West 24th and 311 Vermont Street, are connected, and they're definitely in Covington, Louisiana, because Mrs. Comenge was talked to. So that we can say is a pretty solid point of reference, right? And she brought her 3 boys together with her there, is that right? Yes, sir. At this time, her husband Ekdahl had not joined her, had he? Not that I know of. I assume he was out on his business, while they were spending the summer over there. He came in periodically every 2 weeks or every week or whatever it was. I don't know. It was your impression that he was a research man for what company? A sick man? No, a research man. He did research for Texas Electric, and she told me his salary was over $1,000 a month, which is a substantial amount of money, right? Which is a substantial amount of money. Oh, I imagine so, but sometimes you can get along on $250 better than $1,000. What are you, crazy bitch? That's right. Now let me delve into that a little bit. If it was $1,000 a month, she at that time regarded it as a very substantial income. Is that right? Yes. And you people as well would regard that as a substantial income. Is that right? We people? Yes, the Murret family. My family? Yes. What do you mean, you people? So funny. Yes, sir, we would think we were millionaires if we had that much money. But still, I think we always did a lot with our money. Our main reason was for our family. That's why my husband wanted to educate his children. That was his main reason, because he knew how tough it is, the outside world, so he wanted them at least to have that much. Of course, these are children who like to go to school and who like to study. You take this girl out there. She is studying all the time. You mean your daughter, who is outside waiting for you now? Yes, sir. She's still studying. And Gene, he's still studying. Like I said before, we all worked together to see that everybody got his chance. John was a top athlete in school, and then he went to St. Louis U. St. Louis. Yes, he was one of the few boys that ever got a scholarship to St. Louis U for basketball. But he only went there for about a year and then went on to play at Loyola. And then they kept him after when he went and came here on a visit. So he left St. Louis and went to Loyola. Loyola of Chicago? No, Loyola of New Orleans. Ah, I see. This just hit me. Like, there's a lot of shit going on in St. Louis. So you got Marilyn Dorothea Murret, who lives in St. Louis. And then you have, here you got Eugene Murret, who ends up in St. Louis. There's that big, all of the Armed Forces records section for the records archives for the military is in St. Louis. Like when you want to get all the, like someone who was in the military 50 years ago and you want to get all their stuff, it's in St. Louis. That's where you go. I wonder if there was anything else going on in St. Louis at the time. This would have been 1960, late 50s and early 60s in St. Louis. Yeah, that's correct. Yes, he was one of the few boys that ever got a scholarship to St. Louis U for basketball, but he only went there for about a year, and they wanted him to play at Loyola. And they kept him after when he came on to visit, so he left St. Louis and went to Loyola. I see. St. Louis University, the coach there wouldn't let him play baseball, and baseball was his love. He was a very good basketball player too, but he loved to play baseball. He even played with the St. Louis Cardinals on a farm team, but he saw he would never really get anywhere as an outfielder, so he quit. Huh. He played in the St. Louis Cardinals farm team, and he quit. That's so interesting. But he was a good enough player to play on one of the St. Louis Cardinals farm teams. Is that right? Yes, he was a good athlete. He was good at ball, baseball, and basketball. In fact, He went to Murray, Kentucky. He was one of the boys selected from the South. They had a North and South game, and he was selected from the Southern section. It was an all-star game of some kind. He just won a trip to Rome with the Swift Company. He works for the Swift Company now? Yes. He and his wife are leaving this Saturday. We need to look into the Swift Company. How nice. He earned it. I mean, he didn't win it. He earned it. Now, you say that while Marguerite was in Covington with the three boys in the summer of 1946, that Mr. Ekdahl continued in his travels in connection with his business. I assume he did. That's what he said. I don't know. At least he wasn't there with her and the boys. No. That was your information, that he had her boys at Covington in the summer of 1946 during vacation, but that her husband, Mr. Ekdahl, was not in Covington that summer. Is that right? I don't think he was. I can't say whether he was or not because I don't know, but she said he wasn't. I assume he was on one of these trips he made on his business, and that's why she was over there with the boys, but I don't know any of that myself. I don't think I even knew she was in Covington until I met her one day in town. Here in New Orleans? Yes. And that was during the summer vacation period? Yes. And she told you that they were in Covington? Yes, sir. Had she not tried to reach you in the meantime? No, she had not. Okay, so she's out in downtown New Orleans over the summer, some year, and she just bumps into her fucking sister, right? She didn't know she was there. And she told her she was in Covington. Is Covington very far away? No. How far away is it? About 100 some odd miles. It isn't very far away. Did she say anything to you at that time as to how she was getting along with her husband? Nothing. She just mentioned the boys being on vacation over there and Lee becoming of school age, and she thought that she would just stay there while he went to school. You mean the fall term, when she would put him in school in Covington? Yes. Okay, so now we're in fall 1946, Covington. I need to confirm what grade he's in here in Covington, because there's some confusion as to whether or not he was in kindergarten at Benbrook or first grade. John Armstrong indicated kindergarten, but some of the other notes indicate first grade. So there's some obfuscation here somewhere, or a lack of clarity. It might not be obfuscation, but there's a lack of clarity over his time at Benbrook School in 45, what he did in Covington in 46, and the time he spent in Boston between 45 and 46, which would be mid-September to early February, because that's when he came back and had his mastoidectomy. So, I couldn't say whether he went to school there or not. The next I heard is when she left Ekdahl. When she left Ekdahl, yes. Then to summarize her life with Ekdahl, she married him and took the boys out, the two older boys, out of the orphanage and put them in military school in Mississippi. Is that right? Yes, sir. At her own expense. So she said. Yes, so she said. That's what she told you? Yes. She kept Lee with her. Is that right? Yes. Was he at that time around 5 years old? Yes, sir. Maybe a little older? Yes. And she'd accompanied her husband at least for a time in his travels. Is that right? Yes. And she had the boy Lee with her and Mr. Ekdahl. Is that right? Yes, sir. Okay, so now we're talking about the time in Boston. I thought at least she told me that he did not support Lee either. I thought she told me that. I may be wrong. Was Ekdahl a man of formal education beyond grammar school? I don't know anything about Ekdahl. You don't know? No. But it was your impression that he was previously married and had a son. Is that right? Yes. It's Dewey. She met him there in New Orleans. Is that right? Yes. Well, that's what she says, but that's not true. They met in New York. You don't know under what circumstances, though, do you? I don't know. No, sir. You spoke to you nothing. She spoke to you nothing about the fact that he had a bad heart. Oh, give me a break with this bad heart shit. So she has a husband. She has two brothers die premature deaths in their teens and 20s. Then she has two husbands die allegedly of heart attacks. I think Marguerite Oswald is the fucking Black Widow. And the man's sister had to come down from Boston, and she approved of Marguerite, and she urged Mr. Ekdahl to marry her. Is that right? That's right. And they did marry. See, he's asking questions he already knows the answer to. Yes, sir. No children were born of that marriage. No, I don't think she was married to him very long. They were divorced in 1948, I believe. Is that right? Well, I don't know about the date on that. But they weren't married very long, and the marriage was not, as far as you know, an entirely smooth one. Was it? Well, I only know what she told me. She told me what went on, and have you already told us about that? Yes, that was a reason for the divorce. Had she sold her house that she had there in New Orleans at the time she married Ekdal? Yes, I think she did. She sold the Alvar Street home and moved into Bartholomew Street home, which was a small house. It was a very low-priced residence at 1010 Bartholomew. Yes, that's right. That's in 41 till October. Yes, that's right. See, so we're going back in time now. Yes, that's right. And then she sold that at a profit. Is that right? Well, that's what she said, and that was something else about her. She started sort of getting into the business of buying property and selling it and making money off it and so forth. But things just don't work out the way you want them to sometimes and the way you would like them to work out. Did she also undertake to sell insurance at one time? She said she did. The last time she was here, she said she was selling insurance, but whether or not she did, I don't know. You mean last fall? When she was here last fall? I guess it was in the fall that she was here, yes. That was before the assassination. Oh, yes. She said that she was selling insurance. Yes, that was after we hadn't heard from them for a very long time. I didn't even know that Lee was in the service and so forth. See, that doesn't make any sense at all. She said she was selling insurance at the time when Lee went into the service. No. She was selling insurance for the national company in 1950. She was there like 8 months. They said she did a great job. She was really good. Lee complained to the guy at fucking Youth House that he was tired of her driving around with him in the car all the time, going to sell insurance. And so, no, that was 1950. 1950. So I don't know what the fuck she's talking about here. Let me see. What would she have been doing at the time that Oswald went into the fucking Marines? Well, she should have been doing nothing because she got hit in the face with a fucking jar of candy at the King Candy Company in late 1958, allegedly. And allegedly she was not working anymore and she was living in Fort Worth complaining to the government that she needed her son because she wasn't working because she got smacked in the fucking face with a barrel of fucking gumdrops or some shit, right? So, that being said, we have witnesses to her working out in New Orleans at Cox's department store or whatever department store it was. She worked for like 6 different fucking department stores, Gold Rings and Krieger's and all this shit I never heard of. So, yes, things are afoot here. And then, let me see. Yes, did I already read this paragraph? Now, my daughter's husband was going over to Texas to a coaching school. I think to coach at Beaumont High. So we asked him if he would call them when he got over there and maybe visit and find out how they were doing. See, this doesn't make any sense. When he's going over there, he should go over there and then call them. Well, they have a telephone themselves. Why don't they just call themselves? So I think the coach at Beaumont High asked if he would call, blah, blah, blah. And he did telephone, but he wasn't able to go to the house. But they told him that there had been an accident. She'd been working in a candy shop and a glass jar fell on her nose and that she sustained other injuries. So he told us about that, and I wrote her and I sent her money and I made up a box of clothing or whatever I thought she might need and so forth, a lot of things, and sent it to her every week so I could send what I could, 5 or 10 or whatever it was. When was that, Mrs. Murret? Was that in 62 or 63? That was while he was in the Marines, still in the Marines, because she said that at the time she was trying to get Lee out of the Marines, but his time was nearly up, and she was pleading a hardship case to get Lee out so she could he could give her some support. Now that was over the telephone, I think. That was a telephone conversation that you had with her. Yes. Was this then in the late spring of 1959? Yes, I think so, because he got out of the service in September of 59. That's right, because after he defected here, she visited here. Now, when I talked to her over the telephone and she told me what it was costing her financially and everything, that's when they let him out of the service right after that, I think. Yes, in September of 1959. See, here's the funny thing about Oswald getting out in September of 59, right? So, Oswald would have gotten out in September of 59 no matter what. He didn't have to go through all this bullshit scheme. I mean, in as far as, like, my mother's got a fucking bump on her head, right? Because when Oswald went to the brig in, what the fuck was that? That would have been October of 1958. No, it would have been June of 1958. I'm sorry. June to August 13th, 1958. If it was during that time, he had X amount of days in the brig. I think it was like 45 or 50 days or something like that. Those days got added on to his fucking time while he was in the brig because of his punishment for all the stuff that we're not going to talk about today. So he would have gotten out in September because he had time left. He had remaining time that he could have used for vacation time the last couple of weeks, and he would have been out September 59. But he went to the fucking brig for that time, so they had to extend him to December, right? So it seems like the whole plan was to get him out at this exact time, but why? No matter what, right? So why did they have to go through all that bullshit staging? Because he was in the brig. So was that a hiccup? Was the brig a hiccup for them? I don't know. And what was going on in September and October of 59 that forced them to have to do this at that exact moment? Did they have people over there that would be contacts? Did they know people would be leaving over there? Was he replacing somebody over there in Moscow? Is that why? Was this thing scheduled years in advance? A lot of questions come about simply because of the entire scheme and the fact that he had so little time remaining. So, yes, sir. So then Lee came home and she was living in this one room, and Lee stayed there 1 or 2 days, whatever it was. And then he said, well, this is not for me. Who said that? Lee said that. Lee had money that he had saved. No, he didn't, because all of his money he was sending to his mother. It's in the documents. God fucking damn it. He had saved over 1,000 or 1,400. I don't know the amount, but after he got, how did he save that much money if he was fucking? Here's the deal. This is a more bullshit story. Allegedly, he had some sort of loan sharking operation going on in Atsugi, and that's where he saved the money. I don't believe that bullshit fucking story for a split second. He saved over 1,000 or 1,400. I don't know the amount, but after he got home and stayed there just one day, he said, well, this is not for me. I'm leaving. Lee said that? Yes, so he left. She thought he was coming to New Orleans, so she called me and she said that he'd left by bus and that she thought he was coming to New Orleans and that he had worked as a runner when he was here for a while at Toujague's, and she thought he might be coming here for that reason and that he may stop at my house, but not to tell him that she had called me. But Lee never did stop at the house. If he did, I didn't know it. Did he call you? No, he didn't call. I never heard from him, and I was waiting, and I've always felt that if he had only stopped at the house, this might not have happened. Let me pause and think for a second. Okay, never mind. I was thinking of a time when Lee showed up at her house wearing the fatigues and stuff, but that was right before he went to Biloxi, so never mind. Did he call you? No, he didn't call. I never heard from him, or I was waiting, and I've always felt that if he'd only stopped at the house, this might not have happened. What do you think would have happened if he stopped by or called? I think we might have been able to get him a job, or maybe we couldn't have done anything. I don't know. Well, you would have tried anyhow. Yes, anyway, we didn't see Lee, and I had to go out that afternoon, and I was under the impression, I thought maybe he did come, pass by, and I asked some children in the block if they had seen somebody in the house, and they said yes, and that they saw someone with a small suitcase, but afterward I thought it was a Fuller brush man. I thought that afterward, so then I didn't know anything more about Lee. Could we stop there a minute and go back over this? After the divorce from Ekdahl, did she continue to live in Texas? Yes, and that's another thing. We felt that if she could have gotten along with Ekdahl, that they would have all been together. We would have had someone to look up to as a father and so forth, and things might have been different. But you can't go by what you could have happened. I guess sometimes you make your own troubles. In any event, after Ekdahl left and they were divorced, then she remained in touch with you, but she didn't return here? No. And then at that time, she would have had her son Lee and her son John and her son Robert with her. Is that right? Yes. All living in their home in Fort Worth. Yes. What, if anything, did Marguerite tell you about the way she brought Lee up? I mean, with regard to whether he was to stay in the house after school and things like that. Yeah, she told me that she had trained Lee to stay in the house, to stay close to home, and she wasn't there when she wasn't there, and even to run home from school and remain in the house or near the house. She said that she thought it would be safer just to have him do some chores in the house, like taking the garbage cans out and things like that, and to have him outside playing when she wasn't there. She figured he wouldn't get into any trouble in the house. Maybe she thought she was making it safer for him by doing that rather than being out with other children, but I don't know. I guess that's what happened. He just got in the habit of staying alone like that. That's probably the time that he got like that. He was with himself so much. I take it, however, you heard from your sister from time to time. What's that? You heard from your sister from time to time during all this period, didn't you? Mrs. Murret. Well, every now and then, but after she had left Ekdahl, I didn't hear from her too much. I don't know what went on. I think Robert worked at some supermarket and so forth. He had to support the family or whatever it was. And then I believe he graduated from high school. Robert did. And then I think he was in love with some little Italian girl who was a crippled girl. And she told me that the family liked Robert a lot and they were trying to get the two together and get married. But she wanted to break them up because the girl was crippled. But Robert said he loved the girl, but she was thinking that he was young and she just loved the girl. She just thought he just thought he loved the girl. And maybe if he did marry her, he would find out that he didn't because of her being handicapped and all that in there. And I don't know all the details, but anyway, Robert went in the Marines and all that. I got to know who this fucking clubfoot girl was, man. Oh my God. Diana, any chance you could dig up anything on this clubfoot girl? He went in the Marines on his 17th birthday, as I recall. The same name as Lee Harvey? Yes, sir. Hang on a second. Hang on, let me back up because I'm fucking tripping. All right, so he wants to marry the girl with the club foot, and maybe if he did marry her, he would find out that he didn't like her because of her being handicapped, and all that happened in there. I don't know all the details, but anyway, Robert went in the Marines, and that ended that. He went in the Marines on his 17th birthday, as I recall. Okay, let's do some quick math. 17th birthday from 1934. That would be, what, 1951? Is that correct? He went in the Marines in 51. His 17th birthday would have been, I believe, April the 7th, 1951. Check my math on that. 34 plus 17. I'm sensing some shenanigans are afoot here because I thought he didn't go into the Marines till the next year. So, that being said, it's got to be looked into. The same as Lee Harvey. Yes, sir. That must have been right after graduation. Robert was sort of a nice-looking boy, I think. But anyway, she told me that these Italian people were trying to make a marriage between Robert and his handicapped clubfoot girl. That's what she said. I don't know anything about that, really. So then Robert went to the Marines and she got a job in New York. They went to New York about that time and she got a job at the same people that she had been working for here. Bullshit. Hosiery. Wait a minute. They went to New York about that time and she got a job at the same people she had been working for here. Okay, yeah, the hosiery shop. The hosiery shop causes me some agita over the dates and times and stuff. So... yes, it was the same people, but Lee didn't want to go to school over there. So he was sort of a problem by not going to school. And one day when she was at work, they came to the apartment, they got him and they took him off and put him in this place and she had to get a lawyer and the lawyer got him out of that place. And he told her that he had better get out of New York as fast as he could with the boy and that's all I know about the story. And then it must have been on the way back. I didn't even know she had went to New York, but anyway, on the way back, she must have come looking for a place to stay here in New Orleans. And she came to my house when we put her up here for I don't know how long. See, it's funny because earlier in the testimony, she didn't put her up. Or if she did, it was for a day or two. It was during the time that Robert was getting out of the Marines. That's July of 1955. Okay, all right, hang on a second. I'm going to read this paragraph and we're going to call it here for today because I need to do some reflection on this paragraph because she's tripping herself up in this fucking statement here. So, we're talking about the time when Robert got out of the Marines, which was July of 1955, which makes sense if he got in 1951 instead of 1952, unless he did a 3-year enlistment, which doesn't make any sense. I don't know how the fuck people do 3-year enlistments. But Robert Oswald said that he went to New Orleans first in January-ish of 1954. He took a vacation from the Marines. But then he gets out in July 55, buys a car, and then gets in the car and drives to New Orleans. But we have a major problem here because Marguerite Oswald came back to... Well, this is where we have some major Harvey Lee conflicts here, but I'm going to try to talk about Lee Oswald and his mother, the real Marguerite. They're missing in action from January of 1954 through May of 54. They really are. Because Harvey is staying in fucking New Orleans at 126 Exchange Place with the false Marguerite. That is most certainly happening because the school records confirm it from Beauregard. Period. There's no way around it. And there's no other information on an address. And then we have the conflicting stories about when they're living at Exchange Place, right? So But for the sake of this conversation, Lee Oswald and his mother leave from New York in January of 1954, and they disappear. Allegedly, they go back to Fort Worth. We have no record of them living in Fort Worth. They don't pop up again until they go to live at Myrtle and Julian Evans' place at 1454 St. Mary, right? And then they're there for a year. 1454 and 1452 St. Mary. They're there for a year, give or take, and they're there from May 54 to May 55, or give or take, And so that's a major fucking problem here, because she's saying that this happened when Robert got out of the Marines, which is July of 55. So there we have major conflicts going on. And all right, so I'm going to call it here, and I'll pick this up tomorrow or the next day. But I'm going to do some major soul searching on this paragraph here and see if I can't sort through these fucking details. But that's it for me, guys. Please, please, please head over to Buy Me a Coffee and pick up the new PDF. Oh, I got shirts available. I forgot about that. All kinds of stuff going on here, guys. So help me out. Go buy the new PDF of the incredible story of Harvey Lee Oswald. And that'll do it for me today, guys. See ya.